we're flipping the script. We're going now, as these regulations are being discussed, we are going to the client ahead of time and going, this is what's coming down the road. Here's a strategy we have to help minimize that problem. And so now we're the thought leader in that client. So when the regulatory issue does come up, they're immediately going to pick up the phone and call Adam and say, hey, you told me about this and you have a solution ready to go, right? Boom.
What would it be like to have 20 years of sales experience when running your company, going out and approaching people? Well, that question you don't have to worry about anymore after watching this episode, since I got Adam on here, and he has over 20 years of both sales experience, but also sales strategy, sales training. So a perfect fit when it comes to actually teaching you listening or watching us sales. And the first question I want to start off with, Adam, is what got you into sales, and where does that passion for sales really come from?
Sure. So thanks for having me. It's interesting. A lot of people say you build salespeople, and there's a lot of truth to that. Salespeople can be built. They can be trained. They can be taught how to sell. I believe anybody who has a desire to do it can be trained to be an effective salesperson. I have a little bit different history. So if you ask my friends and family from when I was really little, I was a salesperson at age 5. And I'll tell you why I say that. So as a kindergartner, I would peel the stickers off of my papers that we would get back, from the teacher. They'd have a little sticker of a smiley face or whatever. I'd peel those off and I'd sell them to the other kids in my class to then put on their paper. So when their papers went home to their parents, they had a smiley face or some kind of sticker. I took that money. So I guess I was a little bit of an entrepreneur. I took that money and I bought pencils for the NFL, the National Football League, and sold those off individually. So I bought a pack and sold those off, and kind of just kept doing that sort of entrepreneurial thing for a long time. Then in high school, I was 15 or 16. I got my first actual sales job where I worked for somebody else, and I sold magazine subscriptions over the phone, which was a fun thing to do because we would call right during your dinner time. So this is, late 80s, I guess, dating myself here, late 80s. Here's young 15, 16-year-old Adam calling you as you are sitting down to dinner to say, would you like to renew pick your magazine, People, Time, whatever. Needless to say, you learn a lot of resiliency at a young age by doing that. After that, I worked a bunch of retail jobs, but my true professional sales career started in 99. Right out of college, I went to work for a local telecom company here it was based in Atlanta, but I was in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, so called Bell South. And I worked in small business sales for Bell South, calling on mom and pop companies, your hairdressers and your convenience stores and those kinds of things. And that's really where I cut my teeth and found the passion for business sales because I was really good at it. I could understand a customer's needs and be able to provide a solution to fit their problem. So over the next 15 years, Bell South became AT&T, which is a brand everybody across the globe knows. And I moved from small business to middle markets and then finally to our global business space, selling for AT&T. I did direct sales. I did technical sales. I led sales teams. So, over the course of the last 45 years of my life, I've done some type of sales, and I've always had just that passion and that interest for it. After doing professional sales for about 15 years, I had a great opportunity to move into sales training at AT&T, where I trained salespeople. I shared a little story before we got started here. I did a lot of training for our college hire program. So AT&T would hire in recent college grads to be in their sales organization. And I had a lot of opportunity to develop the training for them and help give them their first experiences into what it was like to be a professional salesperson. Most of them had had some retail experience or something like that, but selling to a consumer and selling to a business, while they're similar, there are a lot of nuances that you've got to learn. In retail, most sales are a single sale. You walk in the door, you buy something, you walk out the door. Business sales are often have a long sales cycle. So it's teaching people how to do that. From there, I moved into, I spent about 5 years sales training, and then I moved into sales strategy, where I got a chance to really get behind the curtain and understand what goes into building a sales strategy at a global company. I worked with sales leaders across the AT&T spectrum, from that small business where I started out all the way to the enterprise and everything in between, and really got to understand the nuts and bolts and how to build that strategy. And that's really the expertise that I bring to my clients every single day, is that enterprise level strategy down to that small business customer. Because I truly believe that with the right strategy, any customer can achieve their vision for what their business is. So I know
At
you
least
had
they
a
should be
short
able
question,
to.
but I gave kind of a long answer to it.
I appreciate that. Well, a follow-up question to that would be, which one do you prefer? To actually like the selling, like building out the sales strategy, or training salespeople? Which one's the most fun? And why, of course?
I think for me, it's building out the strategy is the most exciting part of what I do. And I do a little bit of all three with my clients, but the predominant thing that most of the clients that I have need first, at least, is that strategy piece. A lot of small businesses, they're really good at what they do, whether they're a software developer or an engineer or a staffing company. They're great at what they do, but their specialty is not sales. And so by building out that strategy, we give them the same type of structure that maybe an engineer has to perform their job, or a software development person has to perform their job. They need that structure, not just from what they sell, but they need it to figure out how they're going to sell that product. So for me, the best fun is the strategy piece, because it really allows me to know the business well and then deliver on what they need for their business. Just like what they sell is not cookie cutter in a lot of ways, the strategy can't be cookie cutter either. And so that's the fun part for me in what I get to do.
Well, you're the perfect man to have on this episode because we are going to focus a little bit more on the sales strategy side, because I
Sure.
think, well, your good friend Darren covered sales amazingly on the podcast
Yep.
we did with him. I'll have that somewhere. Go check that out if you want to hear more about
Sure.
that, like the other stuff besides the strategy, at least. But would the strategy be the reason why a lot of like small businesses, medium-sized businesses experience like very inconsistent sales results? It's kind of all over the place. It's not even up and down. Sometimes it goes left and right for some reason. You didn't even know it could go left and right, but it can apparently.
Yeah. Yeah. I wholeheartedly believe that, right? I think the strategy piece and the process, when I say strategy, that's such a big word.
Yeah.
But it's really the process to building anything. That's the key. If you were to bake something, for example, you have to follow the steps to get the result that you want. Let's say you were making bread. If you let the yeast out of the bread, it's never going to rise. No matter what else you do, it's never going to rise. And so what I see with so many small businesses is that because they don't have a structure, a recipe to follow, they leave steps out. And that's where it goes up and down and, to your point, left and right. Because by having that strategy, you control the customer journey. And when you don't have a process or a strategy in place, who controls the customer journey? The customer does. And then you lose all that power in that relationship.
So if I know this is a big ask, let's just
Sure.
get the brief version. But
Sure.
what makes up a good sales strategy? I know we can talk a long time about this. A very big question.
We can. And so there are, in my mind, right, before you even get to the strategy, you got to understand your sales process, right? And you got to understand a couple of things within that sales process. So first is, who is it you are trying to get to? Not the company, not even the industry, but who's that person? because companies don't buy products. People buy products. They buy them for their company, but people in a B2B world, they're the ones who, or in a B2C world as well, they're the ones who actually buy the product. So who is that person that you're buying from? In small business, we cannot afford to market to everybody. We do not have the budgets of Nike and Coca-Cola and Apple to go after the world. We got to figure out who that person is that we go after. So once we do that, then we think about, if we've been in business for a couple of years, how did we get that person from an identified opportunity, that start of the process, to the end? What were all of the different steps? Once we figure those out, once we lay those out, now we can build a repeatable process for our client, for our business. So when I think about strategy, it's really about stepping back, getting yourself out of working in your business and working on your business to be able to take that step back and look at it at the high level. The challenge is, like with anything else, I see that in myself, and that's why I have a coach who can look at things from a high level. When we work in our business all the time, even when we try to step back and work on our business, we sometimes miss the forest for the trees, right? We don't see all of the things that could be done differently, which is where bringing in somebody like myself who can step back and look at what you're doing overall and also compare it to what other people are doing. That's where we bring our benefit and our value to the client.
100% agree. And couldn't resist chuckling a little bit when you say, like, even when we decide to do that, because often when I decide, okay, let's actually do some strategy, it ends up being an hour, 2 hours of strategy, and then something happens, and then all of a sudden we are working instead. And the strategy just went out the window. Like, strategy takes a couple months even to get like a first draft just finished, because then it's a little chunk here, and then you don't really finish it because email, message, or something you remembered popped into your head. All of a sudden, that's what you're working on now, and then next week you try to, then I just have to get back into the mindset again, which is why I think it's very important to have a coach.
I'll give you a real world example that is happening right this moment with a client. I just brought a new client on board last week, and we had a kickoff session. We spent 4 hours together over 2 days, really diving deep into their business. And I've had a couple of questions since then, but I've been doing a lot of work for him in the background. He sent me a message because he hasn't been able to get to a couple of the action items that I've asked for some information on. And he says, wait, maybe we need to just stop because I've got all of this other stuff going on in my business and my personal life that I can't get you what you want. And I was like, wait a second. This is just extra stuff. I'm working on your business for you. You don't need to be sitting by me the entire way. That's what you hired me for. And so he's now able to, during this busy time, focus in his business and in his personal life and allow me to help him with the bigger picture. And then when we get together after this has happened, he's going to be much further down the road because he's had somebody handling that on the business work. And so that's, I think, going back to your point, right? It's not a working 1 or 2 hours and then putting it away and then having to go, okay, what did I do last time? How did I get there? Right? By allowing me to take that heavy lifting off of him, he can now handle the things he needs to handle and allow me to give him the guidance and support that he needs to ultimately scale his business the way he wants to.
Sometimes the action we need to take, even though we're so scared of like spending that money, what if it's not going to pay off? Understandable in a lot of cases, because a lot of people have been burnt nearly more times than it's worked out for them. For their own fault or for the person selling fault, that's up to discussion, but it's rarely, it's at least in the start, personal, and a lot of other people I've spoken to, it's not like a positive return of investment. You have to, a lot of us learn to ask the right questions the hard and expensive way to vet people before starting working with them.
Yeah, that brings it's You are totally on point, right? I've had the same experience. I have, even with what I do, we all mess up. We all have, we make mistakes. I've been in business for a little bit over a year now, going on a year and a half. But again, what I'm doing now is no different than what I've done for the last 25 years. I just do it for a different person. I learned a lot of lessons in the first year of my business, things that I made mistakes on. So I help other young entrepreneurs not make some of the same mistakes that I make. But one of the things I will say, anytime you are hiring a consultant, your job is not to lay out the scope of work, right? Your job is to tell them where you're trying to go, and they lay out the scope of work for how they're going to, for what that looks like. Then the second piece of that is a detailed strategy around what's it going to take to get there and what should you expect to see as you move through the process. Any one of my clients, whether it's a 6-month engagement, a 9-month engagement, or a 12-month engagement, they have a tactical plan that looks at every single month of what we're going to accomplish. And then at the start of every month, we go back to, what did we do last month? Did we meet all of our deliverables? And here's what you can expect for this month and the deliverables you'll get at the end of the month. That's how you as a business owner out there can minimize that impact or that risk of hiring the wrong consultant. Because if they just say, trust me, I know what I'm doing.
Trust me. That's what a person I should trust says. Definitely, they should trust me.
Exactly. Because you don't know me from anybody else. We just started working together, right? And maybe we have a familiar relationship. But when you hire somebody like me, there's money involved. And nobody wants to part with their money. So having that plan ahead coming from the consultant, and be willing to push back. If you don't think that strategy or that plan is what you need, push back. Why do we need to do this? What could we be doing differently? Because again, at the end of the day, it's your money.
And another good tip is ask 5 why questions. Because if it's a person that doesn't know what they're speaking about, they ain't going to get to the 5 why. They're going to stop at 2 or 3, and then they're not going to have any more answers of you. That's...
You must have been reading some of my content or looking at some of my stuff on LinkedIn, because I am all about the 5 whys.
You never know. A little bit of preparation never hurts.
Good.
But with you also having helped so many people with unlocking like sales success and building out good sales strategies, what are some of the most common mistakes you see people make before they come to you?
So probably the 2 most common mistakes that I'm seeing right now is, 1, overspending money on marketing. Yes, marketing is an important bucket that you have to manage too, right? You need customers coming in the door, but you need the right people coming in the door. So a lot of people will hire marketing specialists, and in many cases, unfortunately, what I've seen are some of the marketing specialists are really, really good and they know what they're doing. But there are others out there who are basically just order takers. Who do you want me to talk to? They never push back on why. And so because of that, oftentimes I see people marketing to the wrong people, right? You got to figure out where your audience is. Another example. So I have a friend. He just asked me to help him out recently. And he runs a business where he coaches people on day trading. And so I said, his problem was lead generation. He's not getting enough leads in the door. I said, so where are you targeting? What are you marketing to? He said, 60 to 70-year-old retired professionals who have disposable income. Great. There's your ICP. There's your ideal client. Where are you marketing, right? What forms of marketing are you doing? He's like, well, my marketing person has me on Facebook and Instagram. I was like, time out, right? People 70-year-old men are not on Facebook and Instagram. That's not where they live. So you've got to market to your clients where they live. So that's the one big thing I see a lot of people doing, is spending too much money on marketing. especially if they don't have a good conversion strategy once they market to them, how they get them through the funnel. The second one is over-indexing on AI. We all love AI. We want to use AI, but you've got to use it intelligently. You've got to use it to make things more productive, not necessarily as a Band-Aid to get rid of people or replace people. Because just like any other tool, it's only going to work if it's used effectively. If I had a nail, I wouldn't go to my toolkit and get a screwdriver to put that nail in. I'd get a hammer because that's the right tool. I could probably get it in with that screwdriver eventually, maybe somehow. It's the same thing with AI. I've got to have the right people behind the scenes who know how to leverage AI effectively so that I get the results that I want. So I think those two are the two biggest challenges I see right now with a lot of people. Building on that AI thing, I had somebody tell me a couple of weeks ago that AI is eventually going to replace salespeople. I said, there's no way. It's not going to happen. It makes salespeople more effective. It makes the customer smarter. So the salespeople have to up their game to match what the customer is learning and doing. But at the end of the day, there's still that level of human interaction. And I don't see that changing anytime in my lifetime.
I would say it depends on how you define salespeople. Because if you call customer service sales, then I can see the point. Because it can replace most customer service, but people like that human-to-human impact. And I think it's going to be a very, very long time because we call people really trust a robot. And at that point, the robot's so smart, you're definitely not going to trust it. Because it's going to doodle and befool you and mess you up in so many ways you'd never realize. So you definitely, like, that robot is not to be trusted. It's too smart. I don't want to trust it. It can scam me in so many ways I never thought about before. Like, no, I'm not trusting that one. So
we all remember Terminator.
Yeah, I wouldn't. Don't trust it too much, and people have that kind of fear for it. But I completely agree. Even though with me being very involved in AI, and I agree, it's a tool. It's not here to replace people. It's here to make things more effective. And some people might be replaced. But for example, if we talk about, go back to the sales example, it's only the okay and bad people that's going to get replaced. The good ones, no. But if you do a half-ass job every time, for sure AI can go out and beat you. But that's not AI's fault. The people need to step their game up at that point. And AI is probably going to force that change to happen and make it for the better, at least if you view it in a positive lens, because people are going to have to step up their game, because for all the order taker stuff, it's very short. You can't just get robots to do. And a lot of people are already starting to implement that. But in the way of talking the sales strategy and measuring things, because that's at least what I hear other people speak about. I'm pretty sure I've heard you speak about it before. If you haven't, I'm confusing people at this point.
Nope.
But I'm pretty sure I have. What is some of the important metrics to measure?
So that's where people get into trouble. I see a lot of people who are not used to tracking things and then try to track everything. And then they get overloaded. It's like you haven't worked out for 3 years, and then you're going to spend the next 7 days in the gym, right? Your body can't take it. Your spirit can't take it. Your mind can't take it. So if I were to talk to any new company and they said, okay, what are the things I need to track? I would leave it at 4 things to start with. First, what are the number of leads that are generated by channel? So when I say by channel, how many of your leads come from LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, whatever your social media is? How many leads come from email? How many leads come from your website? How many leads come from cold calling, networking, whatever your channels are, so that you understand where you need to spend your time. Because we don't want to spend our time in places that we're not going to generate leads. So that's number 1. Number 2 is, how healthy is your funnel? This one gets a little bit more challenging, but it's a good metric to start with. So when I think about funnel, we should start every month with a goal. right? Well, we should start every year with the goal of what we're trying to accomplish in that year. I want to get X number of customers, or I want to get X amount of revenue. Okay. You break that number down by 12 so that every month you have an objective of what you're trying to hit. So when I look at my funnel health, what do I have closing this month? What have I proposed this month? What is in my qualified funnel, right? These are people who are actually potential clients. And then ultimately, how many new leads have I identified this month? And there's some metrics around that, some generic stuff. The general rule of thumb, I should have 10 times the number of identified leads is what I need to close. So in other words, if I need to close one lead or one opportunity a month, I should have 10 new identified opportunities that month. Qualified, it's about 4 to 6. Proposed, it's about 2 to 3. So if you use those general markers, now you can really assess your health. The third one is your cycle length. So how long does it take to get a customer from identified to close, right? How long? I like to use the analogy of how long does it take to get them from the front door of your store to the cash register? Because now that tells you what you have to do to meet that ultimate goal that you've got for the end of the year. And then the last one, and this is one that works in a lot of the practices where, like software development, things like that. What's your customer lifetime value? In other words, if you do a project for a customer and it's a one and done project, that's what their lifetime value is, whatever that project was. But if you can use that relationship to then build on that opportunity and build more opportunities, you're increasing that lifetime value. So those are probably the 4 metrics that I would start with. Now, again, back in my corporate days, we probably tracked 30 or 40 metrics. But you don't want to start there. You want to start with 4 simple metrics that you can track to, and that can give you a scorecard at the end of every month of how well you're doing.
I appreciate you keeping it simple, so it's actually memorable for people. If you give me a list of 50, and most of us are going to stop listening at 10 if you're lucky. Probably 5. But just to quickly clarify, when you say identified lead, that's when somebody to some extent shown interest?
No. So this is somebody you are targeting, right? So let's say you're doing outreach, right? And again, this is the different ways you do outreach becomes a little different. But let's say you're doing outreach and you have, maybe they've shown some interest, right? Or you've shown interest in them. It could go either way. But so yeah, those are those ones that you have not yet had a conversation with, but have entered your ecosystem of opportunities. So for example, if you're using LinkedIn as your strategy and you are reaching out to somebody via LinkedIn and they respond, now that becomes at least an identified lead, right? They are somebody who you have interest in for a certain reason, and they've got interest in you. Same thing with social media outreach and stuff like that. So that's kind of when I look at an identified opportunity, they're not yet qualified, right? You don't know that they meet the criteria from budget and authority and need and timing, but they have at least that beginning level of interest.
Okay, so somebody just somehow when they, like, as you mentioned, entered your ecosystem, if it's by, it could also, I guess, be like filling out a contact form. That would also,
filling out a contact form. Yeah.
So just that first base. I like that. Just thought that's a good thing about having people on a podcast. You can ask for clarification. I love that.
Sure.
I get to ask the questions I want to ask. It's a great time. I'm having a great time, at least.
Yeah, no, this is fantastic.
Some people seem to enjoy it as well, luckily. And talking a little bit about your time at AT&T, because you did spend quite a long time there. Not to make you feel old, but nearly my entire lifetime.
Nearly half my life.
You nearly spent my entire lifetime at AT&T. I'm just a few years older than your time at AT&T.
So basically, you're the age of my oldest kid. That's what you're telling me. Thanks so much.
Around that age, yes.
Oh man!
But what are some of the lessons that you take from that time, like doing like leadership sales training from your time in AT&T and use right now in your own business?
So there's a couple. I have had some of the most amazing leaders over the course of my career, and I've had some of the worst leaders that you could possibly imagine. And so it really makes me look at how I engage with people, and I take the best attributes of those top leaders, and I work to discard any of those attributes that I found from the bottom leaders. So, for example, I had my very first sales leader. I would walk through fire for him. He always knew how to get the most out of all of us, not by being forceful, but by coaching and developing us. And so when I got my first job as a sales leader, I went back to him and I said, I need you to mentor me. I need to learn from you what were the things that you were looking for to make sure that I was growing and developing in my job. And so as I work with my clients, I bring those same skills to them. Because I believe that I should only be with a client for a short period of time. Now, short is relative, right? But 6 to 12 months is probably the average. I should only be with you for that period of time. You don't need me or want me forever. So I want to coach you and develop you so that you can continue on the progress that we've made. That was one of the key things that I learned from my time at AT&T and my time in the corporate world. And then the other thing is, and kind of pairs along with that. So it's an old, I'm drawing a blank on, it's an old Richard Branson statement, right? Richard Branson, Virgin. If you take care of your people, they will take care of your customers. And I saw this in action. Those leaders throughout the course of my career who lived that mantra, who took care of their people, you would see a difference in the way that those people engage with their customers, whether these were salespeople or customer service people or people out in the field, right? The way that they were dealt with by their leadership reflects in how they engage with the customer. So I think those from a professional standpoint really do outline a lot of the philosophy that I take in with my business and ultimately then with my clients.
Beautiful. I couldn't agree more with the one, like, it all comes from the top, and then it either positively lifts everything up or it completely rottens all the way down. That's almost like if you place a rotten apple at the top, then all the apples at some point are not going to be very tasty. If you place a good nice apple on the top, it ain't going to destroy the rest of the chain. It only works partly with the one example. Not so much with the fresh apples. It's not as good. But
let me go on a tangent for a second, because you said something that just sparked a thought in me, right? It all starts from the top. And I believe that. It starts from the top. Leadership has to cascade things down, and they have to cascade it in a true way, right? We all know when people are being fake. Nobody's that great of an actor that we can't tell that they're being fake. And so that cascades from the top. But the other thing that has to cascade from the top, and I see this lacking in so many small businesses, is the why, right? I say this a lot, and I've probably said this on every podcast I've been on, but I'm a huge Simon Sinek fan. And for me, it was the golden circle and starting with why. And that is what resonates with everybody in an organization. If you can articulate the why to your business, you now can send that message through your organization from top to bottom. And that message will then continue from your organization through your clients. And it creates retention and loyalty from an employee standpoint, because we are all sharing in that vision, that why. And it creates that retention and that value from your customer base, because people buy for what they love, right? You think about Apple. Before they got into iPhones and everything else, they made computers. and they were expensive computers back then, and they had a lot of challenges. But what they did was they disrupted things, and that message has stayed with Apple throughout. And that's why Apple has such huge market share in the products that they do. They make beautiful products, but they make products that disrupt the system. And so if you think through your business in that way, and you as a business owner understand your why and your purpose and your vision, you're ultimately going to have much better success, not just from your employee base, but ultimately from your customer base. Sorry, I went off on a tangent. That's what you get when you get a sales guy.
Well, kind of what I did expect a little bit. I'm surprised it took us nearly 30 minutes before it happened, though. A lot of the time, the tangents happened a lot sooner.
You've had good questions, so it's allowed me to keep in line.
Oh, I appreciate that. At least I try to have good questions. I actually think the last question is probably the most relevant of them all for today's world, because it's really about how do you keep your business growing and adjust your sales strategy to an uncertain market, which couldn't be much more relevant what's going on in the entire world right now.
It truly is. So I use the analogy of sailing, right? Have you ever sailed a boat before?
Yeah, I'm not too big of a fan.
Okay, not too big of a fan. That's okay, but you at least understand the concept, right? What are you dependent on in sailing? You're dependent on the wind, you're dependent on the weather, you're dependent on the other boats. You constantly have to be looking forward and to each side and making adjustments. And so when I work with my clients, one of the first things I tell them when it comes to the strategy is there is going to be some trial and error with this. And you will continue to have to iterate on that strategy. I worked for AT&T, a company with 125 years in business. And yet we adjusted our strategy yearly, quarterly, and monthly, right? Because we constantly had to be looking at what changes. In this market, you've got to understand where you are impacting your clients more so than ever before. And because there's so much uncertainty, right? We are in the strangest time I've seen in my lifetime in terms of the way the global markets are engaging with each other and interacting. And right now, as we're doing this, we've got a lot of global things going on with tariffs and duties and things like that. But it's a cyclical process. And so you've got to now understand not just how your business has got to adapt to it, but how your client's business has got to adapt to it. And so you now have to adapt your strategy to fit with what works within your clients. So as an example, let's say they're challenged, your client is challenged because of the fact that their profits are decreasing because of the fact that the products they're bringing in to produce whatever they produce has gone up. So now you've got to figure out how your solution can make them more productive or somehow reduce expenses in some other way so that they can adjust their business based on the solution that your business provides, right? And so by doing that, by thinking 2 steps ahead, you can now come to your client with a solution to a problem that they're just starting to experience and be the expert to them in what you do.
I like that. I like that whole being 2 steps ahead, and also the sailing example, because anything and everything in life is kind of like that. You can't predict the future, no matter how hard you try. If you could, most of us we wouldn't have to do anything. We just invest in the stock market because we knew what went up and what went down. Easiest job ever.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's like Back to the Future too. If I could go forward in time and know all the baseball scores for the 50 years prior, I'd be a billionaire, right?
Just place all the right bets.
Right, I'd make all the right bets. I wouldn't have to work. But we can be insightful. I love the word insightful. We can be insightful, especially as we know our products so that we can market them the right way and bring new ideas to our customers. If we can do that, now we bring ourselves so much earlier on in their decision-making process that we're now the experts rather than a commodity where we're competing with somebody else.
Yeah, I had a good conversation about now a marketer with past journalists, and one of her examples was how they view writing in journalism, which is very much like, what are the people worrying about right now, and what are they going to worry about in the future, and kind of focus what they write about that. And that's the approach she's taken into marketing, which is like, what are your people worrying about right now?
Yep.
What are they going to, and kind of plan that out and have an idea about it so you can be ahead of the curve. Because if you're ahead of everybody else, it's much easier because nobody's really going to compete with you only in 3 months' time.
Right. We talked earlier about working on the business versus working in the business.
Yeah.
So I was working with a client recently, and as we were discussing their products and their services and their ideal clients, one of the things that impacts their ideal clients are regulatory changes. And so they were historically being very reactive to it. So they would wait till the regulatory changes came out, wait till their clients saw those changes, and then engage with their clients. We're flipping the script. We're going now, as these regulations are being discussed, we are going to the client ahead of time and going, this is what's coming down the road. Here's a strategy we have to help minimize that problem. And so now we're the thought leader in that client. So when the regulatory issue does come up, they're immediately going to pick up the phone and call Adam. I'm using my name instead of my client, but they're going to call Adam and say, hey, you told me about this and you have a solution ready to go, right? Boom. I mean, think about how that changes the dynamic between you and your clients. So now we all can't do those same things, but we all have the ability as business owners to think through what is my client going to experience, right? That's, we talked about AI earlier. That's where AI can really help you gain those insights and think 2 steps ahead. So you're playing chess while your competitors are playing checkers.
It's not really a fair game anymore. I like when the odds are unfavorable in one direction. Not my own. I don't prefer that. But the other way,
it's not my job. Yeah, it's not my job. It's not your job to make it fair for the competitors.
No, that's their problem, right? Not my problem. Sounds like their problem. That's you, not mine. I'm not. I'm just getting ahead of it before one of you decides to do it. Like exactly. One of my favorite quotes of all time. I think I've said it so many times at this point, I'm probably not saying it completely correctly. But it's from Gary Vee, and he basically said, put yourself out of business before somebody else goes and does it for you. We said before, because at some point, somebody is going to do it. So you want to be the person that's in that position, because then you can change and adjust your business. But for the people that truly love and are interested in what we spoke about today, maybe they want your sales coaching, maybe they have a single question they'd just like to ask you, what is like a logical next step and where can they reach out to you? And all those links are going to be down below in the description. Perfect. So it's nice and easy.
Yeah. So my LinkedIn page is Adam Rojas or Belmore Consulting. Again, we'll have both of those on the list below. I'll even drop my email address to you, so you've got that. You've got my email address, but throw that in the link below. In my both in my LinkedIn and on my website, belmoreconsulting.com, there is a link to my calendar. So feel free to book some time, and you just let me know what you want to talk about, and I am happy to get on a call, get on a Zoom, and I work with clients all across the country. Don't have any international yet, but I got a passport and I am willing to go wherever a client needs me to go. So, as we talked before the call, I love traveling and I'm happy to expand the horizons of countries I've visited. So.
I just couldn't resist laughing because I'm starting to understand in the US, you actually have to say you have a passport. Over here, it's kind of like, given you have a passport, you can't go too far without it. There's a big difference in that. Like, driving more than 6 hours, you're going to need a passport or a boat.
Pretty much.
One of the two. You can't, or you're going in circles. That's, I guess, the third option.
And it's funny you say that. Yeah, I grew up in South Florida. I could drive 6 hours and still be in the state of Florida. So, I mean,
yeah, it's a vastly different place.
It's way different when you get across the pond, as they like to say.
Yeah, like something we Europeans forget from time to time. But Adam, thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you.
And for the people listening, you can hear it. He's a nice guy to speak to. At least you're probably going to think that if you listen to us for all this time. I hope so.
Yeah.
Otherwise, why are you wasting your time and click off? Please go do something else. Well, yeah, appreciate your time. Appreciate you having this conversation with me. I had an absolute blast myself.
I did as well. Hope to do it again sometime.